Welcome to another episode of Horror Dork. Thank you for joining us, tuning in, listening, watching, however you're consuming this episode. Just off the bat, this is going to be a little bit more of a special episode. We're not going to be talking about movies here today, but what defines a horror movie and basically just like genre tropes and stuff like that. But we'll be talking and discussing some films that we feel fit into the gray zone. You know, that area that's just outside of horror for most people, at least
Right.
from a general
It's got
consensus.
it's got like some of the elements or like some of like what you're looking for, but it doesn't quite get there. It's that's what we're gonna try to talk today and kind of like discuss
Yeah.
what makes a horror movie, what differentiates these movies from like what a proper horror movie is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I'm Anthony,
I'm Mr. Sir, sorry.
and Golden's not with us for this episode.
No, that's
He'll
why
be back next week.
we're able to have a civil conversation. So, and
We'll
we're
be
going to be talking
returning
about
with
how Twilight is a horror movie and all that good stuff. Golden won't be here to yell at me.
and we'll be returning back with our Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes, that is why we're doing this little special episode where it's a little different than what we had planned.
But that'll be next week.
That'll be next week. We'll be getting right back into Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the next generation.
So
I have half of mine. Slit your goddamn throat.
So actually, Golden's here in spirit today. I'm channeling him.
Yeah, Golden died, and from
What do you gauge when you get a movie that's not quite horror, but it also had some of the tropes from the genre? Sorry, that's my Golden impression. Sorry
It
if
was
that blew
pretty
anyone's
good. Holy
eardrums.
shit! It was like he was right here with me.
I gotta rewatch that. That looks so ridiculous.
So let me bring up my notes real quick.
So, I just would like to preface the show, like, obviously, this is a hotly debated topic.
Yeah.
You go on any Facebook group, any offline type of forum or whatever, Reddit, whatever, you're gonna see strings and strings and strings of people arguing, or I'm sure in your own Discord chats, you know.
Oh yeah.
You can come join us and have this discussion with us in our Discord chat, even shameless plug. But I think
I'd be in there.
it's very, 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 very hotly debated. But the real fact of the matter is, before we get into all this stuff, is what I feel is important to convey, is it comes down to you, the viewer, the listener.
Right.
You decide what's horror for yourself because it's so subjective.
This is I mean, what we're all coming here with is personal opinion. Honestly,
Right.
like obviously we'll make our cases for what we think is horror and what isn't horror and what makes horror and what isn't horror. But like, just remember, we're just a couple of guys that just like horror movies and we just are talking about it. It's not that serious.
Yeah. And the reason why it's so subjective is because horror isn't really named after like you have like
An emotion.
action. Yeah, you have like romance, you know. Horror is a feeling.
Yeah.
And you have to allow yourself to be subjected to it because you're going to see a lot of people bashing on movies you like in horror groups and they're like, "Ah, that movie wasn't scary." Well, yeah, it wasn't scary because you didn't allow yourself to be in the position to be scared.
Right.
You know, people don't go horror. There's this false perception, I think, for a lot of neophytes into the genre where they think like, oh man, like I can handle this, like, and horror fans can't. It's like, no, it's like, it's not about whether a movie can scare you or not, because frankly, you are so outside of the material. I mean, it's contained within a box on your wall or
mean,
your phone or your computer. Like,
Exactly.
you have to put yourself in there. It's your responsibility to actually conjure up those emotions within yourself if you choose to. And not all horror movies, as we'll talk about, are meant to bring out that sense of dread. We have movies like Killer Clowns or Friday the 13th
Yeah,
Part
you're
7.
not
You
you're
know,
not scared by
fun.
those movies.
They're just meant to be fun and play
Yeah.
with the tropes and just be entertaining in that
Yeah.
aspect, you know?
Yeah,
But
nobody.
you could still allow yourself to be scared by
There-
those movies.
Hey, my wife will watch movies like that and be when she goes to the bathroom, she's fucking turning on all the lights, and she's flying up the stairs after she goes to because she's scared of the dark and or because of the movie we watched or whatever. I'm like, it's a movie. Jason isn't going to fucking come out and kill you in our kitchen.
So, Mr. Sir's brother Scott has a podcast called The Unknown Podcast, and I
Yes.
just bring him up because he was on an episode before, and he made a really good point one time when we were talking about horror movies. We were and check out The Unknown Podcast if you're into music and stuff. It's great.
I've been on there a couple times. It's really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You get to learn a lot about our the weird hosts.
Yeah,
like
well,
Smoothie.
he's pretty knowledgeable in a lot of stuff. So
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're all very like whatever they're into. They're very
right. But the reason I bring
into
up
it.
Scott is because he gave us this famous quote one time. That dog's dead. It's an inside joke.
Yeah. I mean, if you watch the movie from fucking 30 years ago, yeah, the dog in the movie is probably long dead. But I got a little list of some films. Now there's a couple people that have like Guillermo del Toro. He's Guillermo del Toro. Now, he's considered like a horror director.
Whoa. What went through your head where you're like, shit, I better add the Del Toro part? Because you didn't do it in the same voice. It was like an afterthought.
I don't know.
That's all right. It was funny.
But he's considered like a horror director. But and his movies give like a sense of dread, but there's just something about like.
So for you, most of his movies aren't horror.
They walk that weird line. Like Kronos. Kronos is sort of a horror movie. It's about a vampire who gets his powers from an amulet. That
he needs to consume blood.
Yes.
Power.
Movie isn't scary like on its face, but it has like horror stuff in it. Hellboy. Both of the Hellboy movies are just very heavily horror.
Too, it just adds into his whole idea of what he has for fantasy.
Yeah, and like the first one, there's like literally just like Lovecraft monsters in it, and he just like he just creates like his own like kind of thing for it. But and then Pan's Labyrinth was the one my brother brought up to me, and I was like, yes, that perfectly exemplifies what I'm talking about.
I feel like
it's not a horror movie.
It deals.
It's a fantasy movie, but it's got like so
parts in
it. Yeah, like when she's
and it
with
deals
the fairy.
with the horror war and him and the kid's imagination with dealing with the stuff that's going on around him.
Right.
So for me, I would lump Pan's Labyrinth into horror.
Yeah. Whereas like, and again, like it's subjective. Like Anthony and I aren't going to agree on all these things.
No.
Like obviously, like we both have very different opinions. We not very different, but we have different enough opinions about what makes a movie like scary or whatever, or what makes it a horror.
And feel free to let us know right now. We have some viewers here. If you want to lurk, that's fine. But we appreciate it. But,
yeah, you can.
But let us know like some movies maybe that you consider.
All right, so
in the gray zone that aren't horror movies that other people might consider.
So getting into it, like a stuff that we want that is like so borderline horror that not even to really think about it, but it's still related in a way, like thriller movies.
Right.
So we're thinking like Raising Cain, thinking like Bad Influence with James Spader and Rob Lowe, movies like that have like. There's stuff in it. There's a killer. There's people dying. There's a body count.
Right.
But it's more of a mystery. It's not really like, or like in the case of Bad Influence, it's not really more of a mystery. It's like how it's going to. It's like a guy gets into your life and fucks it up.
Like the James Spader.
Yeah, the James Spader and Rob Lowe.
Yeah.
These
That's
are
an old movie.
yeah, these are yuppie nightmares, and like I say that as
What about
I don't have like
what
another
about
word
American
for it.
Psycho? Because that fits into Yuppie Nightmares for sure.
Oh yeah,
But there's no way
Patrick
that's
Bateman
not a horror
is
movie.
no.
Most people, I think, would
Like,
agree that's a horror film.
but that's and again like that's a because you wouldn't consider like Basic Instinct a horror movie. That's more like an erotic thriller or show or but there is like
Some people might.
yeah, like again, like that's why I brought it up. Like I think those movies are like most horror fans would not consider those like horror movies. Like
But I
me,
don't think. I think when you look beat for beat, like for Basic Instinct and American Psycho, you're getting like extreme violence. Where in Basic Instinct, it's exploring this like erotic.
I think
Side more
you're
than
more
it
hooked.
is.
I think you're more like linked on the yuppie part of it, like
More than it is the killer. You know.
Yeah. So American Psycho is, you're following Patrick Bateman the whole time, and he's a fucking psychopath.
I
He's
also
killing
haven't seen Basic Instinct since like 1995.
people. Just that one part, while you wore
98,
your
99,
tape out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like, then you have a couple like David Fincher, who I don't think has ever like made like a proper horror movie, but a movie like Panic Room or Seven, Zodiac, these movies have like parts in it that are fucking scary. Like Seven has
do.
scary Zodiac, the scene when Jake Gyllenhaal's in the guy's fucking crawl space in his basement.
Yeah.
Oh God, I couldn't breathe when I was watching that. I was holding my breath like Jake Gyllenhaal was.
Yeah. But that's more about the investigation. That's what you get for most of the movie.
Yeah.
Is that I don't know, it's
Yeah, that's why I
those are
wanted.
borderline. That's why like when we used to do earlier in Horror Dork, we would always preface the show with like covering all things horror, suspense, thriller, and comedy because people would be like say for Killer Clowns from Outer Space, for
It's
example.
not
That's
scary.
not a horror, that's a comedy, and I don't care anymore.
It's like-
Like it's
What section of
it
the
used to bother me, but
what section of the movie video area did you take Killer Clowns from Outer Space out of?
and again,
The horror section? It wasn't in the comedy section. It wasn't in the kids section.
if you don't want to consider that a horror film, fine.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, hey,
I'm not losing sleep over it
whatever.
anymore.
Most people will disagree with you, I think. And then I got Darkman, like a movie that's made by a horror director.
See, like, but that's a film. Yes, yeah, okay. I see where you're going with that because I'm like, when you
That
mentioned
movie
you
is
wanted to
violent
talk
as
about
shit.
that on the show, I was like, I've never
Darkman is like a
considered.
horror.
I've never even heard anyone say Darkman's a horror film.
He's like a horror character. Like when I thought of like, I was like, Darkman just like has like the vibe. It's got like the horror movie look. It's got the horror
I
movies.
guess I could see
stuff
like in the
it.
50s or 60s or whatever before the comic code, like in EC Comics, it could have been like an issue, like Darkman, so no nerves.
I mean, that's
horribly disfigured.
that's what that's what Sam Raimi kind of based him on was like the Shadow. He wanted to make a Shadow movie, and the studio just wouldn't let him. So they're like, okay, well, I'll just make my own thing. And it was infinitely better than the fucking Shadow movie that they made with Alec Baldwin. Barf. I remember seeing so
race from my brain. I don't remember anything.
The only reason I remember anything about that movie is because it was so heavily like advertised. Like they had action figures.
Is Billy Zane in that movie?
No, that is the Phantom.
Oh, that's
And
Phantom.
That's the other fucking super shitty fucking pulp character.
Yeah, those movies mushed together.
What
in
the
my
hell
brain.
was going on with that shit? Because it was after
Rocketeer.
Yeah,
It was because of Rocketeer.
It was because of Batman, apparently.
But-
So what happened was Batman got popular, and the studio's like, well, what they want, what people like is comic book characters, right? Like, comic book characters like Dick Tracy and the Shadow.
It was movies like Dick Tracy, Rocketeer, stuff that did well, and they're like, well, let's keep going to these indie.
Did Dick Tracy do well?
I don't know.
That movie,
as a kid, it did for me.
I mean, look, the movie.
I don't even know if the Rocketeer did good as.
I don't think
I
that
watched
movie.
the crap out of it as a
That
kid.
movie bombed as well. Both of those movies bombed horribly, and I mean, they're fun to watch. Hell yeah. I watched Dick Tracy kind of like a couple of years ago and I was like, man, this movie has something. It's fun. It's got actors in it.
But back to horror.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And what
I'm
makes
just-
yeah.
Back to Darkman.
Yeah.
But Darkman is like if you saw Darkman.
But I feel like no one's going around being like Darkman's a horror film.
But what I'm saying is like it's got things in it.
Yeah,
That
it's adjacent.
Yeah, because like Darkman, not the movie, the character is a horror movie character. He's all fucked up looking. He's got bandages all around him. He's dressed like the fucking Joe Chill, and he's just what he does to people is just like he fucking breaks them apart.
Here's one if we continue down that line that the sci-fi genre
Yes.
really can cross heavily with horror, and it can be highly debatable. Movies like Predator,
Yep.
Aliens,
Terminator, Jurassic Park. Yeah. Those movies, like again, like I get why people wouldn't say that they're horror, but they do. Like
There are
Terminator.
people that argue it.
Yeah, like what I brought up in the Unknown Pod Discord, because I came up with some examples for this topic, and I was like kind of struggling with finding like more in that vibe. And I said, what about like the Terminator and the Predator? Like I personally think that they're on the line. My brother said that they're solidly horror movies, and I can't
agree
even
with him,
I
yeah.
can't even argue
The
with
first
that.
Terminator and
The first Terminator, yeah, it's a fucking slasher movie where the slasher is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like and underneath Arnold Schwarzenegger is a unkillable robot.
yeah, and that's a horrifying thing to
Yeah,
experience.
it's not a realistic thing to experience, but it's a
Maybe soon it will be.
I am working on right now. I can't do an Elon voice. That's a very bad impression. But like Predator, the first half of the movie is like an action movie. And then what they find out is they're not in an action movie. They are in a horror movie with a monster that is stalking them.
Yeah.
I just got done watching Predator. They're doing it on blank check. They're doing John McTiernan's movies.
Nice.
And they had John Gabris on to talk about
Nice.
Predator, which was really cool.
But what about
Good
Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
Because that movie has a lot of horror elements to it.
It
I feel
does.
like that was a gateway for like maybe we were a little too old at that point, but like a lot of younger kids, it could have helped them get into horror, like the way
Dude,
they
I
say
saw
Disney
that-
movies do. There's a good one, Disney movies.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, there's
People talk about that being a gateway for horror fans.
I can see that. Like, what the hell's that movie? Black Cauldron has some spooky stuff in it. Yeah, and like other
Snow
things that
White.
are like like gateway stuff, like Nightmare Before Christmas. Like you would not think that is a horror movie, but it's got like spooky guys in it, and it's
Spooky guys.
It's got spooky guys in it.
Guys in it.
Spooky guys singing spooky songs. But then you have a movie like like Perfect Blue. Sort of undefinable is like in a genre. It's a mystery movie. There's a killer in the movie.
I mean, I think it's very definable if you do the psychological thriller genre. It fits right in that.
Yeah, and that like I love that movie so much.
Yeah,
It's
and
so
that's
gorgeous.
an anime if you're not familiar with
It's
it.
anime, and I don't want people to just
It's from the
dismiss
90s,
it
yeah.
because it's anime. I caught that movie just by accident. I was at a girlfriend's house, and it was like 2003, and it was on Cinemax, and we watched it, and I was entranced. I'd never seen a movie.
But you're
like
only
that.
tuning into Cinemax to see what came on after.
Dude. Trust me, when I Perfect Blue, that sounds like it's got some boobs in it, and I was like, "It's animated? What the hell is this shit?"
It's like, hold on, like what?
I was like, "Wait a second, this movie actually fucking slaps, and it's really good, and it's visually like one of the most gorgeous movies. Like definitely that one's on Shudder. Check it out if you're looking for something a little different than what you're used to. Um what are some of the other movies I got on here? Silence of the Lambs, like, is
I
another one.
consider it a horror film.
I consider it a horror film as well, but some people don't. They think it's a like a psychological thriller. I think is like the thing.
Thriller, yeah.
Yeah, and this is because it got the Academy.
Yeah,
People don't want to give it a horror movie.
Name it a horror film.
How do you feel? Like, what would Misery?
I've never ever in my life heard anyone say Misery wasn't a horror film.
Okay.
Have you?
No, I
Okay,
just want.
okay.
Okay, but I just
'Cause I
bring
seen
it
that
up
on your
because
list, and I was so confused.
well, I was thinking like movies that don't really fit the mold very well. Like Misery doesn't really fit the mold very well. It's just two people in a cabin.
Yeah, but she's torturing the guy.
I can see that. Like it just doesn't seem like a standard horror movie. I was like I saw the devil. Like where would you put that movie?
I don't remember much about that movie. It's been 10 years since I've
Okay.
seen that.
So,
I remember he's hunting like a serial killer.
yeah, the serial killer kills his family, and then so what he does is it follows
And it's super
this guy.
gory. I
Yeah.
remember the ending and stuff, but
Extremely
a lot
fucked
of
up.
stuff that happens in the middle,
He lets the guy go just to continue to fuck with him. Like the guy will be like ready to commit a crime, and the main character will show up and just like wreck his
okay,
shit.
so we got is Requiem for a Dream with Jared Leto
Requiem for a Dream.
a horror movie?
That's a good question. Requiem for a Dream. Now that one is a tough watch for me. That one was a tough watch. That movie is a horror movie in the sense that it's like one of those scared straight like fucking things where it's
Such
like
a
really trying to
good
scare
question.
you away from like doing drugs.
Right.
Like
But
that-
there is some horrifying things that happen in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, ass to ass, all that good stuff. I was gonna say that. But
No, I didn't.
it's one of the only things from that movie I remember is ass to ass. Like it's just made an impression on me. And I think that's what most people think of too. But Jared Leto loses his arm from drugs. His mom gets completely she gets locked away from doing diet pills. Marlon Wayans gets, what happens to him? I forget. He gets like stuck in like a labor fucking camp thing where he's just like throwing up all the time and like working and doing like labor. Yeah, that was a good question. Made me really think about that. I don't think it's a horror movie because it's more it is like definitely like a drama.
Okay. I think it would help maybe if we defined what we consider personally
horror.
Because I have a wide umbrella for what I
because
lump
I
into
mean
horror.
things don't necessarily have to be scary for me to think that they're horror.
Well, yeah, I mean, like we said, you got to subject yourself to being afraid in order for that to happen anyway.
Right, and if you're like us, like totally entrenched in horror all the time, you're not going to get scared by stuff. However, you got to allow yourself to feel stuff and get lost in let yourself get lost in the movie a little bit.
Because I think, I don't know if I would lump Requiem for a Dream myself personally as a horror film, but I wouldn't really argue with someone who said that they thought it was a horror film. Just
Right.
because for me, if a movie has a horror aspect, and what I mean by that, like it's examining something horrifying,
Right.
whether it's underneath like in a horror comedy, but it's still there, like clowns going around killing people and
Right.
killer clowns
And
from
I
outer
don't
space.
and another thing with horror is that I don't necessarily feel it needs is like killing. Like you don't
Right,
death doesn't necessarily have to play a part in the movie either.
Like a movie like Mr. Boogedy or something.
yeah,
it
it make
nobody dies, but it's definitely about a ghost haunting them. you know.
Yeah. So I think like for me, horror is more of like a vibes thing. Like you gotta, it's gotta
See,
like. I know you have
I hate the
Mister
vibe thing.
Technical man
No, I
hates
just
what
I
when I
hate
say
the
that.
vibe thing because it goes back to the argument with Golden.
Okay.
My favorite horror film is Possession. Oh, that's a
Ooh.
good movie. Banned for 30 years for violence and gore. Yeah, I honestly just seen that like a year or two ago.
Yeah, I watched it probably around the same time you did then, because
Yeah,
it came out on Shudder last year,
yeah.
and I'd never really checked it out, and I watched it and I was like, man, this movie is fucking great. Yeah,
I wish Yuki was here every episode.
yeah. Yeah, Possession. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but that you think? Do you think? Because I could see people arguing that that's more of a thriller, I guess.
Yeah, because
You know,
you're not really sure what's going on with her, what's real and what isn't real.
right?
Um,
But it definitely explores the horror of like divorce or like a bad marriage or something.
yeah, like the like you're having your spouse suddenly has a mental breakdown and you're not.
Gosh dang, I want Sam Neill and more horror stuff,
I
man. You
know.
know,
Well, he yeah, I want to see that unrated cut of the or what's that movie? Event Horizon. Man, that would be killer to see. They would never be able to make they could probably make that movie again.
but yeah. So back to the vibes thing is like, man, I really hate like you have to get a vibe from a movie in order to fit into a genre because I feel like horror can give off different vibes, you know.
I feel you. But
And like the slasher thing with Golden, where it his
okay.
peanut
Oh.
sized brain. No, I was kidding. He has to have a certain type of killer in his movie and like certain shots
And
for it to be a horror
and
film
I was
or slasher
not
film.
going to jump into that combo last time because it was already I was already not agreeing with Golden at all. And I just did not want to fucking argue. But I did not. He's got his opinions on stuff, and that we love him for it, and that's why we have him on the show because we need another. Because otherwise, it's just Anthony and I agreeing with fucking
Or
each other all the
arguing
time.
and getting angry with each other. But yeah, like I think that it's what the film chooses to explore. So, and you could have minor cases, I guess. So a movie like Twilight, you know, getting into that argument because that's what people love to
Scott,
throw at you. At least they used to.
no,
They used to love
and
to be like, "Oh, you consider this a horror film? What about Twilight then?" Doesn't
that
happen as much
started
anymore.
out sort of as a bit with me because it just kind of was funny to see Golden and you kind of squirm and
I never
but
squirmed. I definitely said that it would
yeah,
be
it was fun getting Golden while working
yeah
up too.
because like
But
his thing was it's
I
gotta
do
have
consider
supernatural.
I mean Twilight does have supernatural stuff and I mean that is like exactly kind of like another example of what I'm talking about is like what makes a horror movie? Why isn't Twilight a horror movie? You know, it's got werewolves and vampires and people die in in those movies and stuff.
Because you get more of a romance vibe. Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean it's not. Yeah, I mean you can take
what
you can take
actually
things from horror.
thought just occurred to me because
Sure.
what you're talking about, you have to have a vibe from is probably the same thing I'm talking about because certain aspects are probably going to make you feel a vibe, right? So I think if you boil and dissect um, what gives you the vibe, what creates that vibe for you, that's what makes a horror film for you. The aspects that they put into
Yes.
all of these films. Because I mean, do you really get like the same vibe from and just because we've been talking about so much, say like Killer Clowns as you do from the original Halloween?
No, no. Like the original Halloween gives you a sense of like dread, you know, and that's I think is important for horror. Like that's important aspect of like, are you watching a horror movie? Do you feel dread? All right, then that's part of it. With Killer Clowns, Yeah, it's different because they're doing it in like a funny way. They're still, murdering people, and they look like fucking Screaming Mad George or Chiodo Brothers fucking monsters, creatures, things. That's what their name is, Chiodo Brothers.
No, I'm laughing because I could see exactly what Screaming Mad George's clowns would look like. It'd be a
Society.
way different movie.
I think he did work on Killer Clowns,
Did he?
though. I think so.
But
I
if he
think
was like
those
the
those all
creative
guys
director for the designs, I
are.
just
You know
feel
what?
like
I'm thinking of Freaked because
yeah,
Screaming Mad George and Chiodo Brothers both did effects on that movie.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Again, Freaked is that's not really. That movie's got horror elements in it. It's like practical effect heavy. That's another thing where, like, horror is practical effects a lot of the time are there's like an emphasis on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like less so than like a traditional movie. Like Godzilla movies, are those horror movies? Again,
For
like
me,
it's
yeah.
yeah, like Cloverfield I thought was like a really good like horror movie, like from the perspective of a kaiju attack POV. You're the person on the ground. And I think that is a scary situation to be in. Now, would you think that's a horror movie? I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure. It was scary,
I do.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. But I mean, some people would argue that it's more of an action movie,
Yeah.
more of a
There's not
or sci-fi, which I don't like. The two are kind of science fiction and horror are like very close together as far as
they can
like
be.
yeah.
They can be. Yeah.
Like I wouldn't say like Star Wars has like horror elements in it, but science fiction, the unknown, giving you sense of undread of dread that way, not the vast unknowingness of space
I
and
think
everything.
the reason why thriller and suspense often get muddled with horror is because thriller and suspense are horror because they're about creating that emotion you get when you're horrified. You're dealing with a protagonist the whole
And I
time.
think like I think
That's why that's why I lump in
I
thriller and
think yeah,
suspense
and I
so
think
much with
thriller and suspense are more like grounded. They're more like realistic in
for
the
the most
sense
part.
that
Yeah,
yeah, like Raising Cain obviously is not.
we have a
John
movie
Lithgow,
like The First Power or something, that's like very supernatural, but it's
right?
still considered a
Or like
thriller.
Altered States. Like that movie has horror stuff in it. It's very strange.
Or like the show Millennium. You know,
Yes. Yeah. Oh, man, I hope that we explained ourselves really well. Because I think I hope so.
yeah, I think what we decide is like the the majority of the tone or the theme or some aspect has to be driving home a horror element. So like what I mean by like a horror element is like there has to be that whole opportunity where if you put yourself inside the film or subject yourself to its mercies, like you can be horrified by what's happening.
Yeah, and I mean a lot of the movies are like have like a darkness to them. Like horror movies have like a darkness to them that it's not necessarily needs to match the tone of the movie. Like you can
I was
have
saying that just as one aspect could be tone.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So like a Killer Clowns from Outer Space, just as what we've been talking about. That movie has very dark elements in it as well, and like the tone, like but the tone of it is lighthearted.
Yeah.
But a movie like Seven is not lighthearted at all, and really goes into the darkness. But I don't really quite think it gets to the horror part. Like it's there, but it's more it's tough to say like serial killer kind of movies are they kind of are they feel more like thriller suspense movies to me than horror movies because they're based in real life.
And like for me, I said a lot of thriller and suspense I feel is a subgenre of horror.
Yeah. There's just some. I really wish I could define what my feeling is on that a little better, because there's something of what horror does for me is I don't get from like a thriller and suspense
But
movie.
like thriller and suspense, like if you go back to the origin of it, at least to like the 50s and 60s, they were designed to scare audiences before modern horror films came about in
Yeah,
the
like Hitchcock.
70s. Yeah. And like he was considered the master of the scare, you know, and he was just
I
creating
dare you to be scared by one
suspense.
of those movies now. I dare
Psycho.
you. I dare you to be scared by.
You could easily be scared by Psycho still.
I mean,
Going to take a shower, worrying about someone coming in and stabbing you with a knife. I mean,
fair
true,
enough. Fair enough. You know what? I can't even argue, because I think that movie has just been like in the zeitgeist so long that it's just hard for me to think of anybody being actually like scared by that movie.
yeah, true. Like The Exorcist.
And it's like, and while Psycho is one of those movies that I like a lot, but you know, it's kind of, I don't know, old timey.
Like The Exorcist.
Yeah, but The Exorcist, I think, still works. Like there's a timelessness about like the scariness.
That's what
of
you
it.
say.
I mean,
show it to a
hey
younger
man,
audience
I
member.
say this as a 37-year-old fucking old guy. I mean, you talk to a Gen Zer, they probably would think that it's boring old guy shit.
Yeah.
The Exorcist is fucking for babies.
Because, like, to me, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre always had some kind of, like, timelessness to it. You know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't, because
It doesn't. It really doesn't. And
for
especially
younger
watching.
audiences.
Yeah. I mean, it does. It has a more timeless aspect to it than I would say the sequels. The sequels feel like very dated.
Okay, so, but
It doesn't feel. Texas Chainsaw Massacre feels of its time. It doesn't feel dated.
if you were to show,
Whereas Leatherface
because you
feels
have
dated as shit.
you have two younger kids at home, right?
Yes.
If you were to show them the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which one are they going to enjoy?
2.
That's what I'm saying.
Hands
like,
down. Yeah.
That's why I feel like 2 is like caught in a bottle there. But I think it's because they hyped up the comedy aspect of it so much, you know.
Yeah. I mean
'Cause,
that.
like, Andre watched it. He's 13 and he loved it.
Yeah. It's a wholly entertaining movie, and it doesn't. It's not. Yeah. Again, like what we were talking about with tone, like that. The first one was just straight dread, straight like getting you in the feels. This one wasn't concerned. The second one wasn't concerned with that. It wanted to show you all the fucking blood and gore and all that
Yeah.
stuff that you missed from the first one.
Right.
Like legitimately, just body parts is hanging off of meat hooks and stuff, and just blood everywhere, guts being ripped up, people's faces being torn off. But like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't make something a horror movie for me, and it doesn't necessarily, I don't need that kind of stuff for a horror movie to be effective for me.
Yeah.
Like it's got it. I know you hate me saying it's got to have a feel to it, but it kind of like when you're watching it, it's like I know a duck is a duck, a horror movie feels like a horror movie to me, and it's really it's tough for me to like kind of express in like my words, but
Yeah.
it's just it's something that you're watching it and you are like, all right, you just feel like you're in the horror zone, like
Because it has certain instruments it's using to create
like
that vibe with you.
practical, like there's practical effects, there's um the tone is dark, or it's a dark like feeling for the movie, not necessarily in the tone, but like the subject matter is dark typically with a horror movie, almost always. I think that is a prerequisite, is dark with like
I think the darkness you're talking about is it's conveying the horror of the situation.
yes.
And so you get that dark tone, but it's using instruments, whether it's and by instruments I just mean like techniques. I'm using the wrong terminology here. So there's certain techniques that go into horror films that create what we call horror conventions. So a lot of times people will say like, "Oh, I'm so tired of this convention, blah blah blah." Hey, I was gonna wrap this up 2 minutes ago, but you can talk. Um,
It's all
uh,
good.
the this convention is so overused. It's not overused. It's just being done unoriginally. It's being
Right.
taken and transplanted rather than made its own thing.
Yeah, that's what we just talked about a movie called Megalomaniac, and that movie is like a horror movie through and through.
Yeah, yeah,
It's dark. It's taken from the perspective of the main character, who is a very disturbed person. Definitely check that movie out, by the way, if you like French extreme horror movies.
yeah. So, um, if you like the show, and
I hope we answered. I hope we got into like what makes
next
horror
time
stuff
we'll
for us.
yeah
We just
next
wanted to talk about some stuff that maybe was on the peripheral, and I always like kind of like talking about those things because horror fans, not only just like horror stuff, but and normal people like normal people. Non-horror like centric fans, normies as we like to call them. Sorry. Uh they might see something like Jurassic Park and maybe not even think twice about it being like a horror
right,
movie
right, right.
because it's a big blockbuster Steven Spielberg
And
movie.
there's certain expectations that are built in someone's mind of what constitutes a horror movie. Needs tons of blood, blah 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 blah,
Yeah,
which
but
isn't true. But I think the most important thing is next time when we get to it, we'll talk about more into what gives you that dark feeling or that vibe or whatever, and
yeah.
and those conventions that go into a horror
Yeah, I
film.
think Anthony and I will do some more of these discussion things. This was very fun. I like having these kinds of non like review kind of things.
Yeah, days that
Very fun.
Golden's busy with his movie. Which is called Dingus Day, and
Dingus
he has
Day.
it's wrapping
Talk
up,
about a
but
slasher.
yeah, he has an Indiegogo for it right now, so you can check that out on Indiegogo, DYNGUS Day.
Yeah.
So, guys, if you enjoy the show and you're listening in the future, pre-recorded, we do this live and then we put it out as a podcast episode. Be sure to like and subscribe on your podcatcher of choice.
Yep. Follow us on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, all that good stuff.
So for Horror Dork, I'm Anthony.
I'm Mr. Sir, and this was Horror Dork, and what is horror?